So good morning. Welcome to the automation webinar. We're going to talk a lot about IntegrationHub and Flow Designer and some general automation principles on the ServiceNow platform. Our agenda for today, so speaker introductions, Patrick Boschman. I am one of the architects in the ITX practice, so the IT transformations practice at ServiceNow. My background, I own the ServiceNow platform at a health insurance company. I came to ServiceNow about a year ago, and what I did before as a platform owner, is basically my background is in engineering and data center and automation. So we used a lot around the ITOM features of the platform, as well as running a lot of our automation and our operational playbooks through ServiceNow. And then so we're gonna talk a lot about the value and the value of doing automation and integration on the ServiceNow platform, and then I'm going to get into a brief demo. So we think a lot about ServiceNow. We think about experiences, and some of those experiences that we have today, right? I travel a lot. It's Q4. I was able to go on my phone and book a flight. I was able to, go to, I didn't use Airbnb, but I went to hotels.com on my phone, and I was able to find a hotel room. You can use Uber, you can use Lyft to get around, and then you can stay connected all from your phone, all your social networks really, really easily. When we go to work, it's not so much like that, right? We have different systems of record and different systems of action for about everything we do. Our customer data is sometimes stored in a CRM system. We work a lot in spreadsheets. There might even be some paper forms. That paper form then gets word processed into Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel. So there's just a lot of duplicate work and a ton of room for automation, and a ton of room to enhance that experience across the enterprise. So even at work, right, these experiences are still siloed, and we have, state-of-the-art, the best platforms for doing work. We're using ServiceNow as a system of record for IT. We're working in AWS and Azure and Google for our engineering functions. Salesforce for your sales data, working with your customers. SAP for ERP, and if you have a supply chain. Workday is your system of record for HR. Oracle maybe for finance, ERP. It could also be your HR system of record. But what these all are disconnected experiences. And then up top, to connect those experiences, you're using things like Word and Outlook and Excel, Cisco Teams for collaboration, Slack. Maybe you're using a Workplace at Work, which is a social network feature. It's like Facebook for work. You're using all these systems to communicate. What ServiceNow offers is a platform that allows you to integrate all of those systems and provide a really easy user experience on the front end. With 4 or 5 main functions: speed, the ability to automate and integrate, that user experience. Our platform is natively mobile friendly, intelligence with things like dashboards and performance analytics, and then some of our tools like operator intelligence and alert intelligence to provide those additional insights. And then we allow you to develop at scale, right? You can build applications and integrations on the ServiceNow platform to integrate all of these, seemingly desperate tool sets. So kind of a before and after story. This is a very story that's familiar to me. We did a lot of this at my previous organization. So think about, in the life of change management all the way to incident response. Somebody has to do something, a manual change gets made. Maybe that change gets created in ServiceNow or created in whatever tool you're using for change management. But what you don't have is any visibility, right? You don't know that making this change on this ancillary system, right? Maybe it's an Oracle database. You need to add a table or create a table in an Oracle database. What you don't understand is making the change to that table is actually going to impact one of your customer or internal customer facing business services, because you don't have a CMDB, you don't have those relationships. The manual issue gets created, and what happens, right? We all get on the phone, we start a Slack channel, it's a war room type scenario. Call the engineering team. The engineering team says, no, it's not us. Have the app team pull out their logs. So it's a chaotic response. There's no structure to it. And then what happens, we finally figure out that it was the extension of that Oracle database. It filled up a disk space on a SAN. So then we call in the storage guy and we manually remediate the issue. So we think there's a lot, and we're going to focus on this remediation side a lot today, as well as any of these digital workflows. How do we better structure this communication in our environment? So there's a better way, right? We have change APIs. We also have a great tool if you want to work in the UI for creating a change in ServiceNow. The change APIs allow users, right, through things like a Jira integration. Maybe they want to work in Jira, and they don't want to create changes in ServiceNow. Great. We give them the ability. The Jira story goes into a specific state, and then it creates a change in ServiceNow. So they're working in the system that they want to work in. They're getting the experience that they want to have. We put that change in. It's associated to a configuration item in our CMDB. We now understand the upstream and downstream impacts of making that change. And then when an incident does arise, right? So that we made a change to the Oracle database. We knew it was high risk. It was fully vetted. We did it during a change window, but there's still an issue. We've now taken down that database. We can now collaborate through our major incident tool, right? We can have a digital playbook and a digital workflow around responding to that major incident. And then what we do, we automate the remediation, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Log in to the SAN, extend the LUN, log into the server, extend the disk space into that SAN LUN, integrate with our monitoring systems. Is the service back up? And then go ahead and send out the services restored email. So we can automate this entire playbook on the ServiceNow. So this is a technical process, but think of business in business processes. Some of the requests you get in from your service desk as well are all good automation opportunities on the ServiceNow platform. So we did some research. We have a quarterly workflow magazine. So this is some research that we did. So it's really 4 main silos for automation. We're simplifying processes. We're improving productivity. We're improving job satisfaction, and we're creating increased time for productivity. So the most important one I think we should focus on today, maybe 1 or 2, is increased time for productivity and improve job satisfaction. If I can automate some of that, not interesting kind of meaningless work, adding users to distribution lists in Microsoft Exchange, or creating Active Directory users, or even, building servers in my environment, I can then focus on things that are challenging and interesting, maybe building out DevOps pipelines or solving some sort of business issue, right? So automation allows for simplified processes, improved productivity, and that's going to lead to improved job satisfaction and increased time for creativity. So the tool that we have to do automation on the ServiceNow platform is IntegrationHub and Flow Designer. So the ServiceNow Flow Designer modernizes task automation with codeless natural language environment. So what we can do is we have our subject matter expert who knows how these processes work. So they have triggers. So maybe that trigger is a new record gets created in ServiceNow, or an incident gets created in ServiceNow. We can then take action on that record. Okay, so if an incident is created in ServiceNow for something like my laptop, you know what? That action is actually going to be, we're going to send that issue to another ServiceNow instance through our e-bonding spoke, because we have another company that takes care of our laptop support. And then we could have a subflow, which are micro processes even below that main process. And then we give it to our process analysts, right? So we've created out this flow. Our process analysts can now use these components to build other business processes, as well as enhance those processes. So the idea is to make a really easy to use workspace for building out business and technical processes. And we're going to get into a little bit later when I actually demo the tool, what that workspace looks like. So Flow Designer and Action Designer, that is where we create these flows. IntegrationHub is how we connect with other tools. Connecting to that ServiceNow instance to create the incident in it with a two-way response back to the ServiceNow instance that created it. Or maybe an issue comes in for a software team, right? That software team works in Jira. Create that incident create that story or that bug automatically in Jira, but also, have that data go back to ServiceNow as well. So when we go to make our change, now ServiceNow has all the information about all the development work that was actually done inside of Jira. So for our legacy customers, think of Flow Designer as our workflow tool, and think of IntegrationHub as our orchestration tool. So Flow Designer, it does everything that the workflow engine does, as well as much more complex, I would say, ability to do workflow. For example, to iterate through a list of records, right? You no longer have to write a script to do that. We have flow logic that will allow you to iterate through a list of records and do something to each one of those records. So something like a for loop is easy as drag and drop for one of your business analysts to consume. So it's a spoke-based model when it comes to IntegrationHub. So the hub is ServiceNow, and the hub is one of those workflows. And then we provide spokes in frameworks using things like JavaScript, REST, PowerShell, SSH to build integrations that maybe we don't offer as a spoke. So when we talk about ServiceNow spokes, one of the things to call out here is it's all about content for us. That content is being released on store.servicenow.com, and we're going to release that content on a monthly basis on the ServiceNow store. So some of the integrations that we just recently launched that come to mind, something like Twilio, right? So integrating with SMS. We want to easily create a text message, or we want to open up a voice bridge during one of these major incident scenarios. You can grab that integration off the ServiceNow store and plug that into your major incident response workflow. So it's a reusable integration framework. So things, these are some of the store apps, right? Jira, Jenkins, Kubernetes, all available on the ServiceNow store today. Active Directory, Azure AD. We can also build integrations with things like REST-based APIs, or maybe your engineers have a PowerShell script for doing disk cleanup. We might not offer a disk cleanup spoke, but you could use our ability to consume a PowerShell script and create a reusable disk cleanup spoke inside of ServiceNow using that PowerShell script that your engineers are already using today. So when we think about use cases, I'll go into a lot of companies, right? And we have automation workshops, and we think a lot about use cases. And what I tend to do is I tend to put those use cases into 3 or 4 main buckets, right? End user productivity. Those are the things that people are requesting from your help desk. These are going to be the easiest ones to really understand, because you're going to have tickets on all of these, likely in your ServiceNow instance. So password reset. We have a native password reset capability built on the ServiceNow platform that uses IntegrationHub and Flow Designer to have users' passwords reset. Client software requests, right? So that's integrating with SCCM, another native application built onto the ServiceNow platform. So a user calls in and they want to have Microsoft Visio deployed on their desktop. So that Visio request comes in, maybe the manager hits approve, maybe it's automatically approved, depending on the user's persona, and that piece of software gets automatically provisioned on the user's laptop. Rights management, end user onboarding and offboarding. That's a great use case for what we're going to look at today, adding a user in Active Directory. So you can extend your onboarding process to accomplish some of these technical tasks that typically have to be done as part of user onboarding. Infrastructure automation, so this is working with your operations and SecOps your SecOps teams, right? So automated remediation. Hey, we have a list of patches that need to be deployed on our server. A lot of our customers create patching workflows through ServiceNow because they're already managing the workflow behind it anyway. This is adding automation to that patching workflow. Configuration automation, so this is integrating with things like Ansible, Puppet, Chef, CF Engine, our config tools. Automating in the cloud. We have a purpose-built CMP solution on the platform. Maybe it's something simpler where you just want to build basic EC2 instances or deploy databases out in the cloud. It's a great use case for IntegrationHub and Flow Designer as well. And then we move into business automation. So managing those internal social media networks, integrating with our ERP systems. You know, a great example would be procurement, right? So maybe we consume the procurement data from one of our ERP systems. We then discover it with ServiceNow. We then send data back to our ERP system as part of that procurement process. When that asset is fully depreciated and gone, maybe we're working with somebody like an ITAD, right? IT asset disposal company. Maybe that data ends up in our CMDB. That way we have full chain of custody and full life cycle on that asset data within ServiceNow. So when you get audited, it's easily accessible. Couple of use cases before we go into a demo. This was for a hospital, right? So this hospital was using Citrix, and they were having a lot of application hangs. In the traditional model there, whether the doctor was with a patient or they were doing charting, doctor would have to call up you know, the service desk, and they would say, what's your name? And she would say, my name is Dr. Joanna, and they would look her up, and she would say, I need my Citrix session reset. They would then swivel chair over to the Citrix console, and they would reset that doctor's Citrix session. The problem is that took about 15 minutes, and if a doctor was with the patient and she needed to pull up information about the medication that patient was on, she couldn't do it because her Citrix session was in the process of being reset. We determined that there was a better way, so we took this to really the next level experience. We integrated with our virtual agent technology, and the doctor could go in their phone and they could type in Citrix session. And then the virtual agent asks a question. Oh, I'm sorry to hear your Citrix is hung. Would you like to handle how would you like to handle your stuck Citrix session? Would you like to open an incident, or would you like to clear my own session? And she's like, well, of course I'd want to clear my own session because I don't want to wait for 15 minutes for people to do the paperwork and click the button in Citrix. So you hit the clear my own session, a PowerShell call or a PowerShell or an API call is made into Citrix. Citrix automatically resets the session because we know who the user is. We know what session they're on. All of the data is in our CMDB, and the session gets automatically reset. And that saved 9,000 hours a year for those doctors. But what it did is it transformed that patient experience too. So they're not sitting in an exam room. They're already nervous, wondering why their doctor can't pull up their medication information. So this is a business case, right? This was made by one of our customers. It was not my business case for ServiceNow automation as a customer. But what they did is they took all of the things that they're getting requested to do, whether that be requests that are coming in from the service desks or requests that are coming in for their engineering team. So they came up with 60 processes, right? So that was 65,000 requests a year. And that turned into $2.2 million worth of operating costs. So all they did is they took the time, how many times a year they did it, multiplied that, and they came up with this, for JVM restart. So resetting Java virtual machines. An incident comes in, one of their applications is hung. They automated that entire playbook, and just doing that one automation was a cost, saved $345,000 a year. That's the nice thing about doing automation on the ServiceNow platform. It's very, very quantifiable, right? So these are hard dollar savings that you can give back to the business. It's hard time saving that you can give back to working on innovative work. Okay. So here's our service catalog, right? Here's how we request things on the ServiceNow platform. Here's how we put it in incident. So very, very common request inside of ServiceNow is, I need an Active Directory account. So I go in to request something, or I could type it. We go back to our service catalog and Active Directory service account. So here's our Active Directory service account. We're giving our user a little bit of information up front, what to expect. Request a new Active Directory service account. Approval is required by Abraham Lincoln, the CISO. Maybe that's also by your manager, but we're at least telling our customers up front, hey, you need to get through Honest Abe. So because this is a service account, it's likely going to have privileged access on a server. So we type in a username, webinar user.2, right? So that's our service account. Maybe this was for something like Apache, right? So this is an Apache service account. We provide a password. We could generate this up front. We could provide this via email. We could generate it with a script. We could enforce that the user resets their password the first time that they log in. This is a service account, so you're likely going to want to have access to the password because the user actually might not be interactively logging into this service. And then provide business justification. I need this for a demo of the Active Directory spoke. We hit order now. We check out. I just want to let everyone know too, there on one of the cards that went out over LinkedIn, there was an issue with the time. It said from 10 to 12. This webinar is actually only from 10 to 10:45, so you're gonna get some time back this afternoon. So surprise. So first thing we're going to see is our users now know what's going on. It's awaiting approval. We've told them up front that Honest Abe needs to approve this. So Abe is going to probably open up his phone, right? Or maybe look at his approvals inside of ServiceNow, native mobile-friendly, platform. So Abe actually could have gotten a push notification to his phone because he's out, he's working in the field, and I need this for a demo of the Active Directory spoke, right? So we have all the information that came over on the request. This could be on his phone, and he needs to make a decision. Do I approve this? Do I reject this? Is there enough of a business justification? He hits approve, and our workflow advances. We're actually going to hop into the flow at this point that actually does this thing. So this is our flow right here. This is where we're getting those states. So awaiting approval and the fulfillment state that we're showing our customers, we're simply setting these up in the flow. And if we hit this button right here, shows us our executions. And here is our flow that's actually executing. So we asked a couple questions, right? So we got our catalog data from we got our catalog variables pushed in here. We asked Honest Abe for that approval. If it's rejected, we're just going to send an email that's going to say your request was rejected, and then we're going to end it. And then what we're doing is we're jumping into a subflow. That subflow is called create AD account and move to group. The reason that this is a subflow is because this is reusable work. This is for a service account, but we could have created this subflow to fulfill an onboarding request, right? When we hire a user, we need to create a user in Active Directory, and we need to add them to a group. Maybe we need to add them to a set of groups inside of Active Directory. And I'll go into this a little bit further in a second. If I open up my remote desktop into my Active Directory domain controller, if we refresh, we can see that webinar user 2 was created in Active Directory. if we look for our service account groups, our service account group, we can see that webinar user 2 was actually created as part of that group as well. So whatever permissions that the service account group has, webinar 2 user now has it as being part of that service account group. So if we actually go into the building of this flow, so what we looked at before is this is actually that flow running. If we go into the actual flow itself, here is how we pull in our service catalog variables. So we're triggering it with the service catalog. We're getting our variables. So we're saying our catalog item is Active Directory service account. Here are the variables that I want to pull in. I'm going to ask for approval. Maybe this is, we also need to add a manager approval, right? Anyone approves. So we could then find the user by going like this. Trigger service catalog, requested item, request, requested for. So that's the user that created the request. And then we could find that user's manager. So no dot walking, no code required to query the ServiceNow database. We just got this because we know that this person put in this request, and now we're gonna go ahead and request manager approval as well. If it's rejected, send an email. This email is pretty basic, right? Maybe we wanna add some formatting here. We wanna make this bold, so it's a really, really basic editor for the email. Please contact the office of the CISO with any questions before you resubmit. So we're saying, please contact the CISO office before you resubmit. So we've modified that email. So now this is where maybe our process engineers take over, right? They want to add a message to a Slack channel, or they want to integrate with Microsoft Teams. They can add a step in one of these spokes just by simply adding an action, right? So we want to go on Teams. If this thing gets rejected, maybe we want to send that user a Teams message. Maybe we want to, probably not for this process, but these are some of the other spokes that they can integrate with. Maybe they want to do something in OneDrive or SharePoint. Maybe this service account is for an application development process. So we then need to create something in Jira for our developers to work at. We can easily consume any of this automation right here inside the ServiceNow platform. And then lastly, the subflow, I made the point earlier, we use subflows because this work is now reusable. We could add this subflow to another process for onboarding users.